It's now 7 p.m., Tuesday, March 21st, 2017. I'd like to call the Selectmen's meeting to order. Would everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is public forum, limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Is anyone here for public forum?
Good evening.
Hi, would you please state your name and address for
Yep,
us?
Chris Graham Store, 67 Barnett Road, the long way around. Wanted to just take a couple minutes tonight, and was gratuitous to see that the bike people are coming to town to talk about that. So I think it's great, and I like having them in town, but frankly, their traffic plan leaves a lot to be desired. There's a much better way to skin the cat than what they do, and what we got out there is pretty unimaginative, and it does nothing but inconvenience the people, the taxpayers of the town, for the entire day. So when they go, initially there's a pretty tight group of riders. After they come by that first time, I've sat there and watched, and you go sometimes 5, 10, and more in between having them there, which flies in the face of common sense if you're telling me that you're shutting my road down one way for the entire day, which creates a significant detour for if you go back a few years when they decided to do it on Easter Sunday and you have people coming from out of town and whatnot, it was ludicrous. So if they want to come, that's great. Put a cruiser or get a motorcycle cop from Uxbridge or Grafton to come in and go at the front of the pack that's going there. And then, if there's someone coming the other way, the cruiser will make sure that they're there. And there's still a vehicle on a public way in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so they still need to stay on the right side of the road and everything else that's going on there. Beyond that, I think some of the flaggers that they have working out there directing people off the road, frankly, don't do a great job either. So if you're going to have people out there flagging, they should be trained flaggers according to the regulations in the state. Otherwise, they should be a police officer on a paid detail. But honest to God, there's no reason why we need to shut down roads one way for the entire day. One cruiser with the main pack of the significant sized group of riders would be plenty. Other than that, it's onesies, twosies riding their bike down the road just like you or I would do. Well, probably a little faster, but the same idea is they're riding down the road on their bike, and there's no need to put the people that pay for the roads, inconvenience them for the whole day. So different ways to skin the cat. I'd be happy to talk at length if somebody was more interested about it, beyond what's here. But I think we can do better for the citizens of Sutton than what we do here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next would be the minutes for the Board of Selectmen minutes on March 7th, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes from March 7th, 2017 as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next agenda item is the Green Line Velo Kyle Butler Road Race. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Kyle Butler here? Yes. Come on up, Kyle. This is I think the 7th annual Green Line Velo race that they would like to sponsor in Sutton. We just heard from a resident had some issues with the traffic. I've received a few complaints, one from that particular resident, but from others as well on Lackey Dam Road and other roads. But I figured they'd come before the board, and there's a motion after this. It's up to the board. Thank you.
Would you please state your names and...
Kyle Butler.
And Daniel Fitzgibbons.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us tonight, and thank you for your comments and concerns as well about the event that we have looking forward to coming up for June 11th. Just to recap, last year we worked pretty well alongside the Sutton Police, the Highway Department, and also with Town Administrator Smith and staff to make it as safe and fun as possible. Everything went very smoothly with the Sutton School District as well. And I guess we can just jump right into addressing traffic issues. We have been working for the past 7 years with Chief Toll and Officer Cowan to find the best way to make the event safe, but still have the least amount of impact on the townspeople and the traffic within the town. So their idea to have Barnett be one-way only was a suggestion from the Sutton Police. There isn't a central line in that particular road, so they felt that without that delineation, it may be best just to have that go one way, and traffic would be controlled at the intersection of Barnett and Whitens by a Sutton Police officer along with a cruiser. The enclosure for the race is a rolling enclosure, so they are flanked by a lead and follow vehicle along with motorcycle officials and also emergency personnel that follow the group and support for any kind of mechanical issues. It is definitely tough on that road. There are quite a few residents, and the abutting roads there also have even more residents coming off of that. We are definitely open to working with the town and the police to find a better solution that would have less of an impact on the residents of that area. And we're definitely open to suggestions, and hopefully the police can work with us on that to make things a little bit smoother.
You have anything to add, sir?
I mean, I guess the having worked in years past as one of the flag people on the sides of the road, I think that the biggest problematic one is at the bottom. Was that Mendon and Barnett? Because the police detail is further down on Barnett, but we have a lot of incoming traffic that intends to go up Mendon. So maybe that would be, if there's one place that we're looking at to make, I guess, to make that smoother, would be to how can we make that intersection work better for everybody that's going through there. Whether that's an additional police detail at the corner, I don't know what the solution is immediately off the top of my head.
Okay. Open it up for comment, Dave?
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
I'm Dan.
Dan, thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thanks again for coming back. You guys have been coming back for a number of years. We've had other biking events in town, some of which haven't always gone well. Your event has been well run in the past, with a lot of respect, I think, shown to the race route and to the town. So we appreciate that. It's good to hear from citizens who have concerns, and I think it's good to have an opportunity to deal with the citizen concerns. So it's nice to have everybody here at the same time, I guess. One thing maybe you can comment on, Mr. Grahamsdorf mentioned that there's a pack of riders that are all together at the beginning, but later passes it's more spread out, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to start the race one way in terms of maybe a one-way route, and then maybe open it up to two-way traffic once that first passes through. It's just a thought. I'm going to throw out a couple things, and maybe you can comment afterwards. One thing that concerns me is you mentioned riders traveling near 50 miles an hour, and I guess I worry about traffic on the roads and not anticipating a bike coming that fast and what kind of impact that has. So maybe you can comment about what happens in other races in other towns and how these kinds of things get handled there.
Of course. So, yes, the Mendon Road going down that, as the racers go downhill, do reach speeds, 40, 45 miles an hour. And that was definitely a part where the police wanted to keep one way to limit the amount of traffic going up Mendon Road. And that was just a safety concern for them as for us as well. It is difficult when there aren't lines painted on the road to really structure the flow of traffic and who should be on which side. So that's why both the USA Cycling officials and the police have deemed that it's just going to be best just to reduce the risk of any kind of confrontation between vehicle and cyclist and just have it go one way. We do notify all the residents that are along Minden Road, Barnett Road, and all the abutting residents for the entire route that there would be one-way traffic on some of the roads for most of the day. And of course, we leave our contact information to reach out to us if there are any comments, concerns, or complaints.
Can I just ask quickly, what method do you use to actually contact people, reach out to the residents?
So we do it by mailings.
Last year you didn't.
We'll take down your address. It might not be on the mailing registry.
No one
So-
on Barnett Road got a mailing last year that I spoke to. I spoke to probably 5 or 10 people.
Okay, thank you that's actually very helpful. The mailing database that we receive from the town may not be complete, so if there's somebody that we can get a hold of to get us a new mailing list so that we can get information out to everybody, that'd be helpful, because obviously there are a few absences in those addresses.
So I know you're not super local, but, I mean, would it be possible to even, drive around the race route the week before or something and leave flyers in mailboxes, or?
We have done that for the previous 6 years. This last year was the first year we did mailings. There is a bit of illegality that we have to abide by because we're not allowed to touch any federal mail receptacles. Luckily, there are some of the Telegram Gazette boxes that we're able to put a mailing into, but we can't touch any of the USPS boxes. We have done something where we've taped a flyer to the boxes to make sure that we don't tamper with the receptacles, though some people have called to complain that there was tape on their mailbox, so we decided to do formal mailings instead.
Okay, problems with everything you try.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still looking for better ways to do it, so we're open to suggestions for sure.
Okay. I know a number of my, probably all of my colleagues have a number of questions, so I think I'll cede my time. Thank you. Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you. Every year, I always stress the respect for the residents who live on these roads that pay the taxes, number one. And as Dave indicated, how do you notify them? I heard the same thing. And the list you might be getting from whatever source is not the real list. Because there are some names that aren't on there because of their jobs and their professions. And the last area that I ask is, how is the communications done from one point to the other to the other? Or do you have any?
Yes. So we have a couple of different ways to do it. Of course, there's always cell service where available. But of course, cell service isn't that fantastic, especially around the race headquarters, which is at the Simonian Center for Early Learning. So we have Central Mass Public Safety that comes out and hands out handheld radios that are good for a few miles, but we also have mobile radios that are good up to 10 miles. And we also have several repeaters that are set up, ones that are at the near the intersection of Lackey and Putnam Hill Ave, and also another one that's on the water tower that is down on Mendon Street, down towards the bottom, closer to Barnett. And we have those two repeaters, so that we have communication throughout all of our volunteers that are flagging along the side of the road. Each one of them has a handheld radio. They're always able to get a hold of anybody along the entire length of the course, and also up to race command and emergency services as well. They have a direct channel, and that same goes for everybody that's on a motor official that's in the lead and follow car, the officials at the finish line, and all the race command that's also at the Center for Early Learning.
Do police and ambulance hear this?
Yes, they share the same channel, actually, so they're all able to hear the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan and Kyle, thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. This is I think the second time that I've been on the board that you've come before me, and I have generally heard positive things about your race. You're respectful to the town, you're respectful to the properties, and I know you do the best you can to, handle and be open and transparent. But I do have a couple of questions that may, that were triggered in my mind by some of the comments that Mr. Grahamstoff said earlier. How many riders are in this race?
Throughout the entire day, we'll probably, and throughout the several years that we've had it, the most we've had the entire day would be about 500
Okay.
that are spaced between 8 a.m. Going until just about 5:30 p.m.
Do they ride in waves or shifts?
So there are 3 waves. One is at 11, one is at 8 o'clock in the morning, 10:30, and then again at 2 o'clock.
So they're like heats?
Yes, exactly. And then within those 3 waves, there are 3 smaller categories. And they each have their own rolling caravan and support and safety crew with them. We do educate the riders that once they fall out of the caravan, that they must respect the rules of the road, that they are no longer, they're outside of the safety enclosure of the rolling caravan, and that they're on their own. But those within the rolling caravan, of course, have the support and safety and everything with that that comes with it.
How much distance do you have between the lead and the tail vehicle in this rolling caravan?
So that changes throughout the course of the race. When you first start off, it's just a few hundred meters. But as things spread out, we have constant communication with our COM1 vehicle that's at the back of the race and the COM2 vehicle that's at the front, along with the motor refs to let us know if there's a gap that is forming between the groups, that if the whole group is getting split, that what we do, we put in a motor ref to fill the gap, to protect the riders and let oncoming traffic know that there's a group coming up. We're looking to double the amount of motor refs that are coming because they have the best maneuverability. They're able to move around the pack, get around the riders safely and protect them, and have dual rolling enclosures if the pack does tend to split.
Separate, okay.
So once the race does get a little bit farther, the rolling enclosure could expand to a quarter mile or so. And once there's a big enough gap, then we start to divide them up and have separate support groups for each.
Mr. Grahamstoff mentioned the possibility of opening and closing the roads as the course goes on. You mentioned that the lead vehicles do have radios and they have the ability to communicate.
Yes.
Would it be possible to maybe get another officer, maybe a police officer on a motorcycle, that would have the capacity to, like gates, I guess, open and close the route, particularly the long stretch on Mendon Road, as the riders approach and as the pack leaves, open it up to allow the traffic to go?
Yes. That's completely reasonable, and that'd be something we would definitely like to work on. And we do have, we work with the police and also with the radio communication that we have within the caravan, we're able to provide time checks. So we can find out exactly if groups are getting a little too far apart, where the beginning is, where the end is, and we can kind of trace them on the map to find out exactly where they are. And yes, once we find out that the last caravan has gone through, that's a point where we could open up the road. And the people that are outside of the caravan, the racers, know that they have to abide by the rules of the road. They're no longer under the safety caravan. So that's definitely something that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, because I could imagine if you lived on your road and it would be closed from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, all day, one way, it might be an inconvenience, particularly when you don't see that constant flow. of riders coming nonstop. So if you could, again, contemplate something, talk over with the chief, that might be a positive solution to maybe some of the complaints of the residents.
Right.
On your mailer, do you have a phone number that
Yes.
residents, if they have concerns, can call?
Yes, we have phone numbers and emails as well.
Okay. And the last thing, and this goes to the comment that you made in terms of Mendon Road not having lines.
Yep.
If for some reason some of the complaints escalate and weren't unable to find an equitable solution, would it be possible to reroute your race on some of our roads that are wider and maybe actually have lines to maybe better control the flow of traffic?
Of course.
I mean, obviously not this year because everything's in motion, but
Right.
down the road, if there is something significant.
Yeah, we have, the route's been the same for the past 6 years. The first year, it was a little bit different. We used more of Mendon Road. We didn't use Central Turnpike. But of course, then again, it's a tighter road, no lines in the road. We felt we had a little bit better perspective, point of view, and better rolling caravan on Central Turnpike because of the 2 lanes there. We're able to keep traffic moving. But I would like to have a bit better flow of traffic for the roads, say Lackey, Barnett, Mendon, because it definitely is a big inconvenience to have to travel an extra 5 miles to get home.
Right. Well, as you can imagine, my primary concern obviously is our residents, but I'm also concerned about the bike riders as well. So, if they're on a tight and narrow road, where there's a greater likelihood of something catastrophic happening, I don't want to see that happen as well, so.
Yeah, neither do we, and safety is definitely the first priority. And that's something that we can work with our USA Cycling officials and the Sutton Police to see if we are able to get additional details and possibly have them at the bottom of Barnett at Mendon and have more of a gate system that you're speaking of.
All right, wonderful. I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, guys, for coming. Just a few questions that I had that weren't really covered as much. So you've been doing this race for 7 years now. This will be the 7th year. How many auto pedestrian or auto rider accidents have you had in that 7 years?
There were auto rider. We haven't had any.
None. So what? Now again, to remind everybody. So the race. How much money do you raise with the race?
Not much. The proceeds of the race go to our beneficiary, which for the past several years has been the Sutton Food Pantry.
So the money that you raise for this race for that 1 day a year goes to the Sutton Food Pantry.
Correct.
About how much?
This past year we donated $1,500.
So $1,500 for a day.
Yeah.
Goes to the food pantry for families in need in Sutton. That's pretty good, wouldn't you? I think it's pretty good. I think it's a great thing. My concerns about the whole thing would also be that we're covered already is the flaggers. Obviously we can get more flaggers if you need them, if we need them. And also to find out what made the police decide, okay, guys, you should shut this road and make it a one-way. If they felt it was dangerous, before we go and say, hey, let's open the road and, again, what will take longer for that traffic of riders to come through or to go around? If you're there for 20 minutes waiting for those guys to come through, it might be shorter to go around and people are going to get frustrated sitting there waiting for the road to open, saying how much longer, how much longer. If you're already having an issue with flaggers there now, imagine what what the residents would do if they had to sit there for 20 minutes waiting, and then you said, "Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, you can't go yet." I think that might cause an issue too. I can speak for a few people on Barnett Road, and they enjoy the race. They come down to the bottom of the mailbox. One of the residents, he hands out waters to people as they go by, collects the water bottles off the side of the road, brings his family down there and watches it. So that's another concern that I would have, is changing the route of the race for people that do enjoy the race. Again, my biggest concern in the whole thing that I think we all echoed is the concerns of the residents. But again, the inconvenience to some, but the pleasure for others. The cause of the race, is it worth the 1 day of saying, okay, I've had construction on my road, and I'd had to go around for weeks at a time. I had to go an opposite way. It was construction. I didn't get anything. The town didn't benefit. Maybe they did, but I didn't benefit from it. This is a race that you guys are doing for the town that's bringing in $1,500 to the food pantry. So before we start hitting the brakes and saying, hey, wait a minute here, everybody's upset about this, let's really take a look at this and say, okay, is it worth it for 1 day to give $1,500 to the food pantry? I think it is. You know, and again, my concerns are with the residents. I hear the residents, I hear what they say, and I'm listening to them. You know, but again, I represent more than one person or more than one street in the town, and I have to listen to all the residents. And I hear a lot of people that enjoy this race, and they really enjoy what goes on, and they go down and they watch this race, and they have a good time. So I have to look at it from my standpoint and say, okay, some people are going to be affected by it, absolutely. Let's do whatever we can. Let's make the best of it and try to get along to make those people happy. Come up with a solution that would make them happy first, or make it easier or benefit them, or less inconvenience. But again, I really don't see a way of saying, hey, we're going to absolutely not convenient anyone, make it not inconvenient for anyone. There will be a little inconvenience to this. I have an inconvenience when I sit there and I have to sit at the stop sign for a little bit longer on the two-way road because I got to wait for them to go by. I think everybody in town has to do that throughout the road race. Throughout the race of this route, everybody that's on it will have a little bit of an inconvenience. But a lot of people will enjoy the race too. And I think that we have to look back of why we brought the race to the town and why you guys decided with the police officers to have this route and have it one way. Before we start saying, let's change it. You know, I truly would like to hear what, you know, they have to say too. Or, you know, after you guys talk with the chief and find out, you know, what the, you know, how they feel about being responsible if they're doing a detail down there and they have cars going up the road with a rider going 50 miles an hour. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming in. When's the last possible day if we were to make changes to?
Well, that's the thing. We always have contingency plans, and sometimes it'll be even the day before or the day of that changes would need to happen. In the case of a lot of rain the night before and Manchog right around the lake happened to get, you know, the road get flooded. That's happened before with other events, and they've had to make changes on the fly with getting approval from the selectmen as well as with the police and try to make it work. We're definitely open to suggestions for changing the route if it is for the betterment of the town. So we would probably like to have everything in place at least 2 weeks before the event. That should give us enough time to work with the police to make sure we have the details in the correct place, along with all our volunteer marshals that are out on the road to make sure we have adequate coverage.
I have mixed emotions, and I'm glad that you're here, and I think we've welcomed you every year, and I want to welcome you back this year, too, because you do put a lot of conscious effort into what you do, and we want to support these good things. That's what we're here for. But one thing that I'm not comfortable in is the bikes going 45, 50 miles an hour and racing speeds, and I worry about the liability of some of the bikes coming down some of those roads. So with that in mind, I know we have a motion on the floor. Should we get more talk from maybe the police, or what should we do? Jim, can you give us some guidance?
Well, I mean, it's really up to the board. I think these gentlemen are looking for some direction. You know, if you approve the motion contingent upon satisfactory response from the police department, and you know, I'll talk to the chief and get his thoughts, or decline it and not allow him to come to town. But I think we need to provide some direction, because if we say no to them, then they need to find another town, another route, or you know, go through this process, and it's probably pretty late in the year to do that.
Mike, I just hold your question for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess, as chairman, we've had you folks here for 6 years and now the 7th year, and we haven't had a lot of problems and concerns from residents. So I'd like to see if we can work with it, do this motion tonight and approve it, and then have some conditions in here with conversation through our administrator, talking to the police and with you folks to have better communication. Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, that was going to be, that's actually, I was thinking that, the potential of, giving a commitment of having the road race. And, if, worst case scenario, we can't come to an agreement on the route, you'd mentioned that you're willing to possibly change the route, but still give you the permission to use our town on that condition, so that we can, again, kind of in a different way, Mr. Chairman, than you'd mentioned, but I agree.
Mr. Chairman, you mind if I make an additional couple of comments?
Sure.
I'm listening to some of the suggestions that we've made, starting with me, about trying to maybe have it one way for a period of time, or the gate suggestion, and, I'm looking at this route, and I'm thinking about the roads that are there, and I'm thinking about the amount of time that people are going around, and, honestly, it doesn't seem particularly practical to me to do that. For this reason, I think about residents on the road who, if they're home and they're leaving home in the middle of the race, they won't know, if the gates are at either end, they won't know if it's one way or not one way at that time. So, in some of the elements of the roadway, I'm thinking about Barnett in particular, where it's particularly narrow, and there's some turns there that, they seem to be particularly perilous areas of the road, I would say, for a road race. So I wonder, as you continue to have these discussions, if you might find that some of the suggestions we've had here tonight might just not really work that well. I don't know, some of the comments that we've heard around here, I'm kind of in support of. All things being equal, I like these kind of events for the town. I think they bring positive things to the town. So I want to continue to support this, and I want us to continue to talk to our residents that have concerns and look for, alternate ways to do it. My feeling as we sit here tonight is that, given where we are on the calendar, I think probably moving forward with the race the way that it's structured now might be the thing to do this year. Communicate better, it sounds like, than we did last year with the residents. And then continue to look at the race route and see if maybe this particular Mendon to Barnett route might be a thing you might want to change going forward. That, just as a bike rider, seems to me like those routes in particular, elements of that road just don't feel like the best place for a bike route to begin with, just because of the way the road itself is. But just my thought. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from the board?
I would concur with Dave. I mean, I'm not saying any of my comments are directed saying, stop this whatsoever. I think it's a fantastic race. And as long as the communication's there, maybe, as Dave mentioned, maybe we go ahead with it as proposed this year and then look to modify it down the road. Or again, the alternative is the contingency in the motion. Bring the chief in. Allow the race to go, just pending his final approval. Mm-hmm. At least that way, he could give it some thought and some attention from a town safety perspective.
I have one more. Actually, since, are you done? I wasn't sure if you were done before I...
Yeah.
Okay. After David and Selectman Hall had mentioned that, it does make sense to do that, because that road, that stretch, it brings up the idea that Selectman Lemanik might have had about that. I thought might have been possibly an idea about the gate, but people leaving, and that stretch there is narrow. So, I mean, my thought tonight, going again, and then maybe the year after, to reiterate that, is go forward with it the way it is now, because of being so late, and truly changing that course, that part of the course, to make it a two-way may next year be like it may be a mistake. And we might be looking at it after someone gets hurt, saying we made a mistake on that. So I would agree to continue it this year the way it is, and then make the changes to satisfy after talking to more residents going forward.
And we have a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the Green Line Velo cycling race to be held on Sunday, June 11th, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., with detailed police officers and EMTs, road signage in place, and a copy of the insurance rider on file in the town administrator's office prior to the event.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
The next agenda item is marijuana regulation and possible prohibitions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jen Hager's here to kind of go over, she put together a PowerPoint presentation. This was actually a request of a couple of selectmen that wanted to get a comprehensive look at this issue because we were obviously considering a medical marijuana grow facility. And the planning board has a couple of articles on the May town meeting warrant. One is to define where medical marijuana can be located, and they're determining that to be in the OLI district with an overlay pretty much at Gilmore Drive, which is an OLI district. And then a moratorium on recreational marijuana. It'll give us some additional time to consider bylaws and regulations addressing recreational marijuana, and potentially even a vote of the public that would limit, prohibit essentially recreational marijuana within the town of Sutton. So without further ado, I'll let Jen go on.
What he said, I guess I'm done.
No. You haven't even started yet.
Come on.
Yeah.
I thought that was an excellent summary. I just.
Make sure the speakers are next to you. Jim.
Okay, cool.
Stereo.
All right. I'm going to start with medical marijuana. Medical marijuana was allowed via 2012 legislation. You cannot, per the legislation, prohibit medical marijuana establishments within your town. You can only regulate them. You cannot even pick and choose types of uses. And when I talk about types of uses, I'm talking about cultivation, testing, production, retailing. Those are the four major categories of types within the law. If you do not regulate medical marijuana, it can go wherever a similar use would otherwise be allowed. So for instance, a dispensary could go wherever else you would allow retail or where you would allow medical. Growing and processing could go wherever you allow manufacturing. So for instance, in the town of Sutton, from the
Just keep it ajar if you will.
from the Millbury Town line through Central Turnpike all along 146 is business highway zone. So you could have a dispensary anywhere in that area. There's some industrial along there as well where you could have growing and processing. The office light industrial districts, over 800 acres on Route 122A in South Sutton, would be open for any of these uses. You do have some control with medical marijuana establishment under current legislation, with the fact that you have to issue the letter of non-opposition. So you do have some limited control, but you absolutely cannot prohibit the use through zoning or general regulations.
Just let me insert, my recommendation is that we develop a host agreement, if this comes to pass and somebody wants to locate in the Gilmore Drive Industrial Park, then we develop a host agreement prior to the letter of non-opposition. So we make sure that we get the deal done beforehand, and then I present it to the board for a letter. I think it's important to get that host agreement done first prior to, agreeing to allow the facility.
Right, and that's always the recommendation of town council, and I'm going to come back to that, kind of that general discussion, just briefly when we talk about recreational marijuana as well. All right, so the current actions we're taking with respect to medical marijuana are the planning board has sponsored an article to create a medical marijuana overlay district and regulate this use in the zoning bylaw. The mod is currently proposed as South Sutton Commerce Park in the Office Light Industrial District. It's about just shy of 120 acres. And the board originally thought about opening up the entire office light industrial district, but like I said, that's over 800 acres. It includes all the acreage that was previously aggregate, all of the surrounding parcels, 20 other landowners up there. And frankly, the use is so new to us and relatively new, even though it's been in place since 2012. You really only have about 9 operators currently operating statewide, that we reconsidered and said, you know what, we'll keep the area small for right now, see how this goes. And because it's an overlay, we're proposing it as an overlay, it's relatively easy to add additional areas to the map. So that's what we're doing with medical marijuana. And I will post, there's a copy of that, or there will be within the next half hour, a copy of the wording of that bylaw downstairs. The legal ads hit the paper tomorrow, and the planning board hearing on that is April 10th on all of our proposed bylaw changes. So, and I will post those on the planning board's webpage as well if you'd like to take a look there. All right, now on to recreational marijuana. All right, so this one's allowed by the 2016 legislation. I want to make the point up front, because this, in exit polling and all kinds of discussion around the time the legislation came into place, a lot of the people who seem to vote for this were very, very focused on my personal right to consume, my personal right to grow my own supply, and my personal right to consume. So I want to make the point very clearly right up front that the personal consumption portion of the regulation is not affected by local regulation we're going to talk about now. And nothing we do in our regulations can prohibit personal consumption and growing in accordance with the law. I will talk very briefly about the board's ability to prohibit things like consumption on public property and the like. But personal consumption, the rights that were gained through this legislation, are not affected and cannot be affected in any way by local regulation. That is currently accordance in the law. Commercial production and sale can be prohibited. So medical, no. Recreational, yes. But it may only be prohibited by a ballot question. You can also pick and choose the types of uses to allow or prohibit. So you can look at cultivation, testing, processing, and retail, and maybe you're okay with a grow facility, but maybe you're not okay with a retail store. So you can pick and choose. Marijuana cafes for on-site consumption may also be proposed via a ballot question sponsored by a set percentage of voters, and I will talk to you a little bit more about that. So this is kind of the background on recreational marijuana. It's very hard to see this, but this timeline that was compiled by Connor Robichaud and Jeff Bagg at Central Mass Regional Planning shows the timeline per the legislation. The timeline the legislation creates what's called the Cannabis Control Commission, the CCC. That control commission has to come out with draft regulations by March of April of next year. And no, actually it's mid-March of next year. Within 2 weeks after coming out with their draft regulations, they have to begin taking actual applications for the use. Somewhere between now and then, they actually have to create an agency. There's the governor had to put in place $4 million worth of funding that wasn't previously anticipated in the budget, as well as an additional, I believe it was $600,000 to $800,000 just a few weeks ago, to just pull together initial funding to fund this new, basically, agency, to give them offices, personnel, phones, just the basics, to regulate recreational marijuana use. Medical marijuana use is regulated through the Department of Public Health and through the Treasury. There's an agency already existing to regulate that. The legislators of this, the proposers of this legislation, intentionally circumvented those offices because it's, in their, what they said, taking too long to get those establishments up and operating. Over 200 applications, only 9 operating. They said, no, don't want that to happen with recreational. we're just going to create an agency whose only job is to look at these, review these, and get these up and rolling. Unfortunately, like I said, that agency does not currently exist. So between now and the near future, that agency is being set up, it's being manned, it's being staffed, it's getting an office. Lot to do between now and when regulations are due out of this commission next March, mid-March. As you know, town meetings in Sutton occur in May and they occur in October, and articles have to be at least draft articles have to be provided 60 days before each of those town meetings. So with the regulations, the draft regulations not even coming out until mid-March, you're already past the deadline for May. And final regulations are not due out until, I believe it's August. So at that point, you're already past the warrant deadline for the fall town meeting as well. So we at least need to be able to see the draft regulations before we write our bylaw. So, and these are some of the issues I just talked about. The current legislation has many, many questions. The Mass Municipal Lawyers Association has written letters. The Mass Municipal Association that Jim is a member of have written letters. There's over a dozen bills currently pending that may affect the legislation. Additionally, the governor has requested that this legislation be presented to him by May to address some of the issues raised in the legislation. So there are big fat issues that need to be dealt with. The current options we have to deal with this are the following. The selectmen can put a ballot question on a local election to prohibit one or more types of recreational marijuana uses. They can also put a ballot question to limit the number of establishments to 20% of the number of off-premise liquor licenses. There is a third option which wouldn't apply to us because it's a number, you can choose a number less than the number of dispensaries you have registered, which we have done. So we have those two options. And then you can also do bylaw regulation of recreational marijuana like we're doing for medical marijuana. Those are the three options within the law. The fourth option is kind of outside the law, and that is an option we're going to take advantage of at Springtown meeting. We're going to put a moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments for all of the things I've already talked to you about. There are no state guidelines. We really are not comfortable pulling a rabbit out of a hat and just making up regulations that are based on medical marijuana, because the legislations that made those uses come into being are vastly different. So we are going to ask for a moratorium until Halloween of next year. And our intention is to see the draft regulations in March. We feel there definitely will be some action on a lot of the legislation currently pending that will hopefully clear up a whole ton of the issues that are in the language of the legislation right now. And hopefully between the legislation and getting the draft regulations, we'll be able to work with all of the communities in the Commonwealth who are dealing with the same exact issue and at least begin to draft some really comprehensive regulations that are in concert with those initial regulations from the CCC. So 10/31/18 will obviously get us through fall town meeting. I did go to a session put on by the Mass Municipal Law Association, and there were various officials there. And basically, the indication was the Attorney General will probably approve, their municipal law unit was there, they will probably approve moratoriums that run no later than the end of next year. There was also a note made that you really need to act, have a moratorium, have a regulation, be taking some actions by April of next year, if not by July at the latest, because that's when applications can start coming into the state. When an application comes into the state, April 1st, those start coming in, the application comes to the town has 90 days to report back their recommendations. If you don't have a moratorium in place, if you don't have regulations in place, the state has no grounds to prohibit anything. You have to have something in place. So that was a recommendation they made very strongly at this session, that you need to do something. I have talked to town council prior to going to the Mass Municipal session, and they said, there's no harm in going for a long or longer than 12-month moratorium now. If the AG doesn't like it, we just bring back a shorter moratorium in the fall. Both myself and town council were actually at the MMLA session, and we heard basically the municipal law unit clearly say, you're pretty much good through moratoriums through the end of 2018. So we're pretty confident this will get through the AG's office, no problem. All right, so why am I talking to you now? Town council has recommended that if a town intends to pursue a prohibition, for some of the timing issues I've already mentioned just briefly, that action sooner than later is recommended. So at this point, the Board of Selectmen need to make a policy decision. The Planning Board is not empowered by law to make this decision. The Board of Selectmen have to make a decision whether they wish to place a ballot question on a town election to prohibit and or limit recreational marijuana establishments. What I've given you here is the question for vote results in Sutton. On the original legislation, 42% of registered voters in Sutton were in favor, and 43% were opposed. Just under 5% did not come out to vote. There was another just under 1% that voted, but didn't vote on this question. What I have there on the right is, you may have read in the paper lately that Westboro's already voted this prohibition at their election, and that is the language of their ballot question. I also provided you through Deb not just a copy of this, but a copy of the actual ballot language, a copy of the KP Law briefing on this subject. And that briefing does just touch briefly on the other thing for the selectmen to consider, which doesn't need to be done now and probably shouldn't even be done now, but you need to think about going forward, is if you don't prohibit recreational marijuana, you need to think about not just zoning regulations, but public health regulations. You currently prohibit smoking, for instance, on public property. Are you going to you need to think of the general bylaws you then need to enact as they relate to consumption of marijuana on public property. And like I said, related Board of Health regulations, fine structures, and the like. So that's where we are on this subject. I am happy to take any questions. I just wanted to touch back on Jim's point earlier in terms of host agreements. There's two things to remember. If you don't prohibit recreational marijuana in the current legislation, although the wording is really poorly written, it would appear that you have to allow recreational marijuana wherever you currently have and or allow medical marijuana. It's another reason why the language is really bad, and they use the term area. So is that a zoning district? Is that a physical area? Is that a site? It needs to be clarified, but that's another reason why the planning board said, we're not going here with the zone, we're going here. Because even though we're talking about medical, it has an implication for recreational in the legislation if it's not prohibited. So that's one thing. The other thing in terms of host agreements, recreational marijuana host agreements are capped as to percentages. The state does a 3.75. They take 3.75% off these establishments. The town can take up to 2%. It's not entirely clear 2% of what. It's kind of fuzzy again in the legislation. Hopefully that will be clarified. So recreational is much more controlled in terms of income, local income. One of the things that council has recommended as medical marijuana establishments come in, particularly if you vote to prohibit, that you take the belt and suspenders approach of also writing right into your host agreement with a medical that they will not choose to convert
Right.
to recreational. Or you put in a reopener provision that says, you can come to us and apply to convert to recreational or to also do recreational, because you can do both. But this is what will happen then. So that when you're drafting host agreements for medical, that you are forward thinking in terms of recreational. If the CCC fails in their duties and do not produce regulations by 4/1, if they run out of time, if they just don't get to it, then every registered medical marijuana facility can automatically begin cultivating, selling, whatever, recreational marijuana. They are also the first ones who will be considered for licenses for recreational. There's actually a good year or two, it's at least 2-year lag time before people who are not already medical licensed can apply. So there's definitely an advantage to those who are already experienced in the medical arena in this legislation. So we're doing medical
Thank you.
regulations, we're doing a moratorium. You guys need to decide whether you want to do a ballot question. KP Law is the attorney for Westboro, and as you know, many, many other towns. So you already have ballot language if you wanted to go that route. But it's, the planning board agrees and honestly don't have the power to address this, but they agree it's really a policy question.
Thank you, Jen.
Should someone shut that off?
Sure.
Future's too bright.
Hey, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jen, thank you very much for all of this. As you know, I've been doing a little homework on this stuff, and it's very confusing. In fact, I think a lot of it is actually contradictory, so it's impossible to really know what all the answers are. But you've previously, through discussion and through your presentation here, has helped to make a little bit of sense out of it for me, so I appreciate that. This has really been a lot of work. But if I can ask some specific questions.
I will try to answer them.
You know, some of this is just maybe as much curiosity as anything, but, so regarding medical marijuana, it says it can't be prohibited but only regulated, and yet we also seem to have kind of the right of refusal if we just don't issue this letter of non-opposition or support.
I'm really shocked there hasn't been successful legislation or effort on behalf of proponents to change that
Challenge
little
that.
snippet in the law. Yes, you cannot prohibit through any written regulation that use. But per my bullet on my presentation, you do maintain a modicum of control. The place where that would fall apart, which you don't have to deal with, is the law, the medical marijuana law required that every county have at least one dispensary, have at least X cultivators, and Worcester County's already met that number.
Okay.
So that letter of non-opposition would be relatively worthless if that hadn't already been met. The fact that we have dispensaries already permitted in the county, in the service area, makes your letter pretty powerful. The other thing is, too, medical marijuana producers in general, there are so many towns out there who just really want the revenue. This can be a substantial revenue source depending on the size of the operation and the nature of the operation. So most operators that I've talked to, and I've talked to quite a few in the last 6 months to a year, they have no interest in battling a town if they just don't want it. They definitely will target a town because of visibility and location and where other operators are. And Sutton tends to be a very attractive town, being so close to Rhode Island, in between Rhode Island and Worcester, and so close to the Pike to get elsewhere. But they don't have a lot of desire to fight with the town. And particularly medical operators know that in the current legislation that hasn't been altered, that letter of non-opposition is key. So, no, you can't really prohibit it, but the letter of opposition does
It gives you that
work
power anyway.
to prohibit.
So on that same page, that same slide, you say you cannot pick and choose the type of uses.
No,
Is that true unless you do bylaws and that kind of thing? Because, as we discussed, the thing that comes to mind for me is that a grow facility and a processing facility is one thing, but a retail location is a very different thing. And so I'm still, I guess, not clear if we have the power to say you can be one thing, but you can't be the other.
only through your letter of non-opposition. If you look at the medical marijuana legislation, they don't break down in the definitions cultivating, testing, processing, retailing. They don't break them apart. It is medical marijuana uses, basically.
And because
You are not allowed to do that in your regulation, period.
And because we've chosen the OLI district, where in fact in the past we've had retail locations, so our existing zoning regulations sort of don't stop retail from occurring in that district.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Do we have the power to prevent retail in a grow facility by the letter of opposition?
Yes,
A condition within that letter?
yes.
All right.
So what you're saying is
Yes.
opposing only that element of it.
Well, we can allow a grow facility,
Only for.
but not a retail facility. But that needs to be stipulated within the letter of non-opposition.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So just to clarify that point, that's fine if you have a medical facility, but if we don't regulate, if we don't disallow or thank you, that's a very good word. Retail,
Recreation.
personal, where am I here?
Recreational.
Recreational, thank you. If we don't do that, then somebody up in that OLI district could open a retail location through the personal use stuff.
Absolutely,
Okay.
right.
All right, I'm just trying to keep it all straight. I want to jump to the end if I can, and then come back to the middle. You talked about Board of Health issues if we don't regulate.
If you don't
So,
prohibit.
If
right.
we don't prohibit. But as you said at the beginning, individual users are allowed to possess and grow their own. So don't you still have those same issues because people can possess marijuana on their own? So we still have to worry about whether they're consuming on public lands or whatever.
So you would put in, as you have for, say, not allowing smoking on public property.
Or alcohol.
Or alcohol. You would expand that prohibition to include you cannot possess, or you can't use and/or possess on public property.
So that sounds like something we're going to have to do kind of in any case.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, medical marijuana, you can't do that. If somebody needs medical marijuana, if they need a licensed prescription on them, you can't say, no, you can't have that in your pocket. You can't do that. And there are certain safeguards within that law in terms of types of work you can perform. If you need medical marijuana, there's already those kind of safeguards. But in terms of recreational marijuana, you absolutely have the ability to say, no, it's still a controlled substance. You can go to federal law and say, no, you can't have that on public property. Can't do it.
Okay.
But you need to kind of look at your whole kind of realm of bylaws you have, kind of open your general bylaw and start flipping and going,
Where does it apply? Where does it
where
apply?
does it apply? What do we need to make sure we do? And when I talk about Board of Health regulations, it's not, it's also for, you currently require a common victualer's license for restaurants. You require a car dealer's license. You require liquor licenses. You need to decide, if you don't prohibit it, what your licensing structure is going to be for these establishments, or you can have no licensing. And to that end, again, the Board of Health has a licensing process for restaurants. Are you going to have a licensing process for growers? Are you going to have a licensing process for retailers? Is there going to be a standard? These are things people will ingest. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to address in very little time.
So let's go to the recreational use. So first of all, the moratorium, I am very pleased to hear that the planning board is going to support this, I think, or put that forward. I think that given the state of affairs with the law, it just makes sense to get some clarity on these things before we really deal with these issues. But if we want to, if the board wants to prohibit recreational use in any form, the only way to do that, as I understand it, is the ballot question.
That is the only way to do it.
And as you pointed out, the timing is of the essence, because if we don't get to it now, we may be too late.
Right.
So this is for the board. I really want to hear from the voters on this. As Jen pointed out in her slides, although the law itself passed, I guess, relatively easily in the state, in Sutton, it didn't pass. It was close, but it didn't pass. And I think there's a lot of issues around recreational use that really haven't been, I don't know if thought through is the right word, but to me, I think we need some clarity on it. And my personal concern really has more to do with retail locations than anything else. So from my perspective, frankly, I'm really not all that bothered by grow facilities or processing facilities. I'm particularly concerned about retail locations. The OLI district, I think, gives us some protection in terms of where they go. There's a church up there. I think that changes the nature of what's up there. And around the rest of the town, I'm having a hard time envisioning where I think a good retail location would be. So certainly, if anybody else thinks that a prohibition on more than just that would be wise, I would support that. But certainly, I think at least a prohibition against retail locations, I would like to offer to the voters to tell us what they think. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I too, my notes, they're all bullets. A vote by the town, absolutely definite. They've already voted and indicated one way, but a full vote for this. The bylaws, Jen, the typewriter's going to work. I would support the moratorium to 2018. And then just on a technical aspect, Commerce Park being maybe not the location, but in that area, you can protect the water source because all that location up there is prevented by backflow prevented devices, and the sewage can be managed going out. That place can be watched and seen, so what's going back into our earth can be monitored.
Right. I don't know if I gave you a copy of the map. If not, I apologize. But the overlay district is the office light industrial district, but only that portion of the district represented by South Sutton Commerce Park. Okay, so the office light industrial district obviously goes across the street. It goes where that West Side Connector Road hopefully will go someday. It goes east to Oakhurst Road. You have a whole nother huge chunk up where aggregate is. So because it's an overlay, you can pick and choose areas that make sense and per the purpose statement. And so the board designated office light industrial, but only that portion, which is South Sutton Commerce Park, basically.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jen, wonderful job as always. Thank you for coming in and presenting this to us. I'll be honest with you, I don't really have many questions, a couple minor ones, hopefully you can answer. But I would like to preface anything that I say by appreciating the fact that you made effort to differentiate the fact that any type of prohibition or regulation is on the retail component of personal use and not private personal use. Thank you for bringing that forward, because I think that's key, because we don't want to generate a firestorm where there is none. This is probably easily answerable, but I'm going to ask it anyways. I am also in favor of the moratorium. I am also in favor of the ballot question in terms of prohibition, but is there enough time if we use the Westboro draft language to get it on the ballot in time for town meeting?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. We're talking with Dave in regards to retail earlier. Were you referencing medical retail or commercial, private, no, personal retail? I don't know how you would phrase it.
Recreational.
Yeah.
Recreational. Yes, medical retail, you can't. The only way you can prohibit that is via your non-opposition letter. So I was speaking in terms of recreational retail.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of the licensing, again, I think if at some point we do go down this move, obviously there are so many contingencies that we need to address. And I'm also going to agree with the point that you made, that I think if voters realized the chaos, I guess you could say, that have come with this bill, because I've talked to legislators and they've all said it's very poorly drafted, and that's part of the reason for the chaos. As we move forward and there is clarity, do you think you're going to see the state sending down guidelines in terms of, licensing components and proposed language to deal with the Board of Health and?
Absolutely, absolutely. Already, the Mass Municipal Association and the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association work very closely with various arms of the state government and legislators on these issues. It was in evidence very strongly at the session I attended when you looked at the panel and you had a representative of the Treasurer's Office there. The thing you have to remember about recreational marijuana in particular is it's federally prohibited. This is an all-cash industry. You can't bank recreational marijuana money. So there's lots of financial implications and things to consider in terms of public safety and those kind of things as well. And what you saw in the panel was a member of the Attorney General's Municipal Law Unit, a member of the Treasurer's Office, a member of the Department of Public Health. I mean, it was an amazing cross-section of the partners that are already talking, already working together to pull out issues and to start working together. I have been working with Central Mass Regional Planning and a group of local planners, the Northbridge planner, Gary Bechtold, the Grafton planner, Joe Layden, the Shrewsbury planner, Bernie, I apologize, I don't remember Bernie's last name. And we've been working together with CMRPC, and I sat on a panel in Northbridge last week talking about moratoriums and helping other towns to format moratoriums and answer their questions on moratoriums. So there's a huge cooperation effort statewide and actually with state government and legislators to make sure we're all kind of looking at this together, we're all asking questions, and we're all getting samples of stuff that come forward. The Westboro planner, Jim Robbins, and I are friends, and I had access to his ballot language and all of this stuff weeks ago, because there's a great, we all are facing the exact same questions and the exact same issues, and everybody's concerned. So there's, lots of sharing, and I'm sure the work's already starting on a number of fronts, and we'll have what we need. I'm confident we'll have a good part of what we need. I pray the CCC has time to come out with draft regulations, but I'll be shocked if a lot of the legislation currently pending to clarify things doesn't pass, because as you guys have noted in speaking with the legislators and other officials out there, everybody has the same opinion that there are just big big issues with the language on this legislation.
I mean, there's even a case currently pending at the SJC where they're discussing whether or not someone can be terminated if they use medical marijuana. So even something that has been established for many years, there is still not answers to
Exactly.
all contingencies. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate your efforts, and again, I think I would stress to my colleagues, putting a pause on this, at least for the time being, is more than appropriate.
And we can't sit on our hands. We have to be able to show that we're working and moving forward, that we're not just sitting there doing nothing. And, and that's not the reason, but a good thing about being on the panel in the working groups with the other towns, so we can show them that we are not sitting on our hands. We are working on this.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thanks, Jen, for coming in and all the work you've done. You'd think we'd learn as a state, because we're not the first to do this in the states. So you'd think we'd learn from mistakes that were made in the other states that have legalized it, but we still have just the mess that they had when they first started out in states like Colorado. Just a couple questions that I had were, to kind of, confirm what I think, but I'm not sure. So medical marijuana, we can't put any guidelines on that, like where it can be smoked. So it can be smoked in public. It can't, can it?
I am not an expert.
All right,
on
I wasn't
medical marijuana
sure,
consumption by any stretch of the imagination.
but they can have it on them.
It's my
Yeah.
understanding if you have a prescription, like any prescription substance, you have the ability to have that on you.
Okay,
I do not know the state law or the regulation with regard to when and where.
Now, do you mean-
ingest?
all right, that's what I meant, ingest. Having on you, you can have any marijuana on you anywhere now.
Well, as
Like-
long as it's below a certain
Right.
quantity.
So, but what I mean is, to consume medical marijuana is different than putting the guidelines on recreational marijuana.
Yes.
All right, so right now, if we don't do anything, somebody could smoke a joint in the town common, and we couldn't do anything,
I would say.
because we don't have that regulation. So you could,
Well, you can't smoke on the town common, so.
right, because it's not,
probably
that's what I mean, that's what
You can
I
eat
just,
some laced gummy bears.
yeah, well, that's why I was like, again, to sit back and to say, do nothing. From what I understand, if there isn't a bylaw, it can happen
Right.
until we put something in place, right?
But we'd want to consult with council in
Good.
terms of allowances,
Uh-huh,
somebody's legal allowance for consumption, like, is it against the law? Or,
Okay, all right.
To prohibits from somebody who's got a prescription from ingesting on public property.
Yeah.
You'd want to know that. You don't want to put it.
yeah, it's, now, I agree to not go too deep, because most of the questions were answered. I completely agree with my colleagues here on putting a moratorium on it, figuring out what's going on before we move forward. Send it to a vote for retail sales to see what the town thinks. Because my concern isn't, it's not the marijuana today, it's tomorrow, it's the gummies tomorrow, it's the candy bars, it's all the other ingredients that cannabis is in now. And it's a matter of, okay, is that a real candy bar, or is it a cannabis candy bar down the road if we have retail and we have a store, where we can have it? That's what scares me. So again, let's, I agree with my colleagues on the fact of, what you recommended today, along with what you brought up, and bringing it to a town vote on the issue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jen, for coming in. I think we have a little better insight on it, but there's still a lot of questions that haven't been asked. And I would like to wait a little bit on some of the things, but I think we should support the agenda number 3, the motion that's on the floor tonight.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to make a motion in support of a moratorium on recreational marijuana as proposed by the Planning Board until October 31st, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman, regarding the, discussion of putting a question on the May town election to prohibit recreational marijuana, do you want to make a motion now, or would you rather wait to the next meeting? Because, really the only issue is the timing of when the board signs the warrant, the election warrant. And that plan is April 18th, the board will sign not only the town meeting warrant, but also the election warrant.
I think if it's clear and simple, we could do that vote tonight.
Okay.
I just had a quick question, just as Selectman Lemanik had brought up.
Sure.
To clarify, this isn't recreational marijuana. This is retail recreational marijuana, right? Because we can't stop recreational marijuana usage.
Personal,
We can.
personal
We can't stop, no, you can't, we can't stop personal use of marijuana.
consumption.
Consumption.
Yeah, but those are different things. We can stop recreational facilities.
Facilities, right.
Recreational,
Recreational-
grow, cultivation,
Recreational
retail.
facilities, not recreational marijuana, right?
Somebody wants to have the
That's all.
legal limit on them, or they want to grow their 5 plants, or whatever is allowed in the law. What
You
you're
can't-
doing now does not affect that
Okay.
in any way, shape, or form.
6 per
My
person,
one
huh?
cautionary, and I don't want the board to do something I am not completely certain of, and is that what I'm hearing is, or I'm hearing definitely, let's do a vote to prohibit retail stores, retail recreational marijuana stores. I would suggest, just to be certain, that you double check with council before you make the vote, that there's nothing in the really poorly worded legislation that says if you don't prohibit the other things, cultivation, processing, and
Testing.
testing, that you leave a door open somewhere there.
It seems like the Westboro question
It was a flat prohibition.
Yeah.
is is comprehensive.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. What does everybody, I mean, I said retail, but what does everybody else want to do?
Yeah, it doesn't affect personal use, but it does does regulate or prohibit cultivators, marijuana testing facilities, marijuana product manufacturers, marijuana retailers, or any other type of
Marijuana business.
licensed marijuana
Recreational.
businesses. So it's pretty comprehensive, but it doesn't affect personal use, obviously.
I would echo Jen's concerns in the fact of the potential of the back door. That would be my only fear. Because, again, we're in the Wild West. Who knows what the outcome's going to be? And if we allow one type with good intentions and they could force it upon the town and open up something that we were opposed to, I think we go all or nothing.
So shut the door with all or nothing, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
What's the date you need, Jim, for a motion?
We need it soon, don't we, to get,
Yeah, well, ultimately, it needs to be on the May town meeting, which means the election warrant is signed on April 18th. So, there's only one other meeting that we have, and that's April 4th, I think.
you can either
So
do
you
it-
can make it tonight. You can make a broad motion to place a question on the May town election to prohibit recreational marijuana uses slash, facilities, et cetera, and let us draft it, and then we'll present a draft on April 4th and final adoption on April 18th.
So we have a placeholder.
Yes.
all right, so we just vote
Prohibit.
to support, to sponsor the
Do you
vote.
want us to check with council on the other one, or are you just going to do a flat prohibition?
I would recommend flat prohibition until we find
Flat.
out send it to the voters, kind of like Westboro did, right?
We're just talking recreational here. so-
Recreation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, all uses, not just
Yes,
retail.
yeah.
Something hybrid of the Westboro language.
Right.
Motion in support of a ballot question to prohibit all types of marijuana establishments.
Recreational
Second.
marijuana.
Recreational. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah,
Vic?
that's fine, and that, obviously, we'll take that draft and we'll come up with an article and present it to the
Make it
board.
appropriate, clear with town
Right.
council. All right, so then I will formally make a motion in support of a ballot question to prohibit all types of recreational marijuana establishments in the town of Sutton.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and I have one more question for you, because you just made that motion.
Now you tell us.
Oh,
Town
she doesn't want it.
council- Town council currently recommends the belt and suspenders approach, again, because the language of the statute is so lousy. So he recommends that if you do a prohibition by election, that you still also do a bylaw to, literally a general or a zoning bylaw to prohibit recreational marijuana as well. We have time to do that in the fall, so I'm assuming, and I just want to make sure, that you want to see how the voters vote, And then if they vote to prohibit, we
Establish a bylaw.
do that in the
We
fall,
established.
Fall town meeting.
right? We
Right,
don't want to do them
perfect
both
sense.
now in case one goes one way, and
Right, there's no point in doing
even
that.
though the election does occur after town meeting.
With the combo of the moratorium and the approval by the voters, would that be sufficient to pause any type of outside entity to try to force their way in?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, time to do it.
So that would definitely be the way to do it.
okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Jen, thank you very much.
Nice job.
Can you read my scribbles?
Next on the agenda items, we have the library trustees slash Shaw Farm. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The trustees came to meet with me and asked for, care, custody, and control of a small portion of Shaw Farm to build the proposed library. I kind of pushed back on Betsy and made her go back to the MBLC and, say that the town owns it. I mean, why does the library trustees need to, control it? She went back to the state, and the state said that the land needs to be in the care, custody, and control of the trustees. So what I'm proposing is a 99-year lease with the library. They will, there won't be any payment. It's not for $1 or anything, but it's just a 99-year lease. They are, they still have responsibility for maintenance of the facility and HVAC and other costs, but ultimately, this is just a question that ultimately will go on the May town meeting warrant as well. So I just want to brief the board about this. Go ahead, Betsy.
I have two different renderings just to kind of give you a bigger idea. Dave LaValle's working on the meets and bounds of the exact plot that we need, but really it's just like a rectangle kind of trapezoid thing around that part, which will probably be about 3 acres of Shaw Farm. So it's it's a very small percentage. So there's that one, and then this one, if it makes it clearer. So, yeah, just that. And like Jim said, we talked to them, we said, well, the town owns it, we're a town department, and they said, no, they've been bitten before in this process, that the library will go in with town-owned land, and then something happens. So it has to be in the care and control of the trustees by the middle of June. The ultimate decision for our grant from the state will come down in July, so it has to be lined up before then.
Now, the library trustees don't get ownership of this land after the May town meeting vote. It's contingent upon the town elections supporting this. If they get approval in July to go for a construction grant, or they get a construction grant in July, they need to get that construction grant approved by the voters in town by 6 months. So October is probably the time frame by which they will have to get that vote. So everything will be contingent upon that vote. They won't get control of this land until the residents of town vote to support a library at this site. At that point, it'll turn over to the trustees.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, this question might be as much for you as anybody, but, I presume this building is not going to last 99 years. So if it's a 40 or a 50-year building, let's say, why is 99 years the choice? Like, what happens to that land if in the future that building goes out of use as a library, and let's say the site for some future library is somewhere else? So it's no longer being used as a library, but there's a lease.
Well, that's a good question. My guess is, we would have to negotiate with the trustees and end that lease. We could put provisions in the lease that we award to the trustees contingent upon if this land is no longer used for a library, is discontinued for any reason, then it would revert back to the town of Sutton at no cost. So.
Okay.
That would be reasonable.
Seems, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like a technical point, but
Yeah.
this whole thing seems no offense to you guys, just kind of crazy. That
Yeah.
I can imagine a ballot question is going to confuse people.
Yeah, well, people already think that we're getting ready to build because of what passed in the fall, and they keep coming in and saying, "Oh, well, when's it going up? Did you already start?" No, not yet. So it's a lot of steps.
And I guess the same kind of question, and again, I don't really envision where this would be a problem, but once you have this lease, then really the town is no longer in control of what else might happen on that parcel.
So at that point, we would have been awarded the grant, which is one of the contingencies, and there are a lot of things in the grant that specify what we do. So when we are awarded the grant, we'll be building that building. So there wouldn't really be a lot of risk of, something else going on there.
Right, and so without really having clear examples, but 10 years from now, if somebody wants to, I don't know, put up a shrine or something, and you know what I'm saying, like that's in the control of the trustees at that point, and not.
Like Lisa said, in our contract, it's like
25, it's
25
20
years.
years it has to be a library.
right, and if it doesn't, then we have to pay all the money back to the state. So.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you,
Paul?
Mr. Chairman.
All right. The way I see it, it's a 3-acre plot. It's a paperwork shuffle only with the additional wording. I'm for it.
Yes, sir.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I'm going to piggyback a little bit upon Dave's question because, again, I had some people contact me after FinCom, and they had some pretty pointed questions that I couldn't answer, so hopefully you'll be able to provide those points. One of the first questions is along the lines of the potential closing of the library. Is library discretionary spending on the town side, or is it required in the bylaws? I know we have to have a school. I know we have to have a police force, a fire department. Do we have to have a library?
No, is the easy answer.
Okay.
If we cut the library beyond a certain point, then, we've got to, contact the MBLC, write a letter of exemption, which we, not exemption, but a letter to them requesting the decrease in expenditures to maintain our status as a certified library, which we get, sharing books, programs like that.
Reciprocal privileges with other libraries around us.
Okay, is what she said.
So if we don't have a certified library, you can't go to Millbury and use their library.
Okay. So yes, there are implications if we don't support the library, but nothing requires us to do that. If the town, it reaches such a point where we have to cut services, it's typically the non-essential services that go
Right.
first.
And that's where this
Council on
person was
Aging,
going, right.
Library, last to cut is public safety and the schools. We generally don't try not to cut them, but, we've had to cut the library in the past and go below that required spending limit and write letters to the state to get that exemption.
Yeah, because this resident in particular was very concerned with the size of the building, 18,000 square feet?
17.
17. All right, which of course is larger than this building, I believe, and the possibility of us hitting budget ups and downs, like has happened over the years, and us reaching that critical mass point. We're now potentially, if something happens, we would have this massive structure that would serve no purpose because it couldn't be funded. Whereas the money had to go to the school or money had to go to the police department. But as you mentioned, I guess there's a 25-year contingency, and the town would have to pay the money back. But then we would have this massive building. Hey, maybe a new site for town hall or something. All right, the other two questions, again, come directly from your presentation to FinCom, and there were some residents that were concerned that you guys were unable to give actual head count of residents that use the library. You gave the book scans, you gave the value. Do you know exactly how many residents consistently use the library? Not how many people have library cards, but
No.
actually use it.
I said about 60,000 people through the door a year.
How many individual are they?
Like I don't think we could.
Yeah, I use that door in the morning when I come in, so.
Sometimes the bathroom for me.
I don't think we could say, okay, Joe Smith came in the library 10 times and Susie Smith came in the library 5. We know how many times people come in the door. We know how many books we circulate. I think it would be difficult to say
How many
individual different people use the facility.
Well, this individual, actually, a couple individuals mentioned this question. It's easy to kind of hide the actual usage in that number. Because if you have 1,000 people that go in and take out a couple of books over the course of the whole year, that could inflate the number. But if you have a smaller group, that could be loyal supporters, and I know there are many out there, that take out the majority of books, it makes it almost look like this facility that we have now is overused. And if that's the case, is this project on this scale justifiable?
So the scale of the project is very similar to the libraries that are around us that have lower circulation than we do. So for example, Millbury is about this size and their circulation is lower than ours, right? Or close. Webster is building an enormous facility, much bigger than ours, and their circulation is half of ours.
On a good day.
On a good day. So it's not out of scale. A large portion of this is meant for the community. It's got this 100-seat community room. And also, this is built for a 25-year horizon. This is built to last the town. And that's part of the design and why it's the size that it is.
But in an age of technology and everything's getting smaller, I could probably have your whole stack in this little device. You know what I'm saying? So that's a concern.
But it's not just about the physical materials. It's about the gathering place. It's about having a place to bring your child, to have music and movement, for people who can't afford to go and pay $300 at a private music school. It's about people learning languages from home. You can learn 150 languages through our Mango language program on your iPad, sitting in the comfort of your home.
I have Duolingo, free app on my phone. I'm learning German. Sprechen Sie Deutsch.
Yeah, so I think
Fit you.
it's a different type of library. It's not all about the books anymore. It is about the books, but it's also about learning spaces, computers. We have several different computer areas in there for people in town who don't have access to these devices that are magical for everyone else. There's a lot of
But again, it's that use
So-
versus the scope.
well, the scope.
That's
a lot
the
of
concerns that I'm
size
getting
is-
from people.
The size is dictated more by the programming spaces than the stacks, I would say. Because we have children's programming spaces, we have local history space, and we have the community meeting room. And then we have private study spaces. So I think, again, the scope of the building is really more about the community than the books. And to be fair, the library has provided a big service to the town outside of the books because we provide a lot of recreation opportunities for children and adults in town.
And these type of
through our book-
programs couldn't be located somewhere else? Maybe like at the school? Because I know the school has a relatively open door policy during the summer months and things like that.
They charge for outside people to come in and use it. They have to staff a certain way when it's being used outside of school hours. And they can't during the day accommodate these children's programs because we are and during the day, during the school year, we have the toddlers in, we have mothers and children in, and they can't just wander into the school.
And how could I staff? I mean, if you want to do programs off-site, I still have to staff the library. So it means I need 2 people here and 1 person at a program. Where if I have a person here running a program, I can have 1 person at the desk, and that person's not alone because they do have a staff member they could pull upon if they absolutely had to.
And actually, I'm glad you brought up staffing, because that was the other line of questioning that I got from several people. The additional costs of staffing. We have a much larger facility. You claim that you're going to be able to run it with current staffing, but as was brought up at FinCom, there's probably going to be a custodial requirement, there's going to be additional maintenance costs, there's going to be utility costs, all the things that currently are not reflective of your budget. Again, we're reaching a point budget-wise on the town side where, because of things like health insurance costs, we might be at a good point today, but tomorrow we might be on a downturn. Are you going to be able to justify to the town residents that you're going to be able to absorb these costs in such a way that doesn't impact fire, police, schools?
Well, all right, can I point, so this is our floor plan. This is an entrance that comes up Shaw Lane. There's a circular driveway, and it goes off, and the parking's up here. So most people will be using this entrance. This is our front desk area, so it's sighted to see both of those doors. And also, this is a glass wall to keep an eye on the bathrooms, people using the meeting room. And then this all here is all open. So we've got sight lines so that it can be done with 2 people. On average, I mean, 2 people is, maybe I have a couple hours at night when I just have a couple people down there. Usually there's at least 3 of us, sometimes during the day even more. So yes, obviously we would need custodial staff. We currently are using a senior work-off, tax work-off person to vacuum the library twice a week. Even with all his time, he could not vacuum that, I don't think, in the 2 hours a week he's allotted for that. So that is a concern. As far as regular staff, we're good. We've thought this through. We've been working on this for 4 years.
Groundskeeping?
Very little. We have where's the other one? A grass road that goes around the outside. That was on this one. But very little, just some shrubs and bushes around the edge of the parking lot. There's essentially no mown grass or anything like that. Very low plantings.
And last but not least, the other question that I was asked, plowing.
Well, I was hoping the town would help us out with that. These spaces down here are to push snow out of the way.
Well, I know particularly like down at the senior center, the town trucks, down at the end of the list, go through and do the parking lot, but the staff still has to shovel the walkways. Did you put that into your planning as well? Because you might have to, at a site that size, purchase additional equipment.
The library is typically closed on snow days when the school is closed, as is the senior center. So both facilities give us a little bit more time to plow, and obviously if this was a town responsibility, it's not a primary responsibility. We'd get to it when we're done with the primary and secondary roads, and, we're cleaning up the schools, parking lots, the senior center, and other facilities as well. The HVAC cost, that was another cost that...
So I got
Jesse
3
mentioned.
estimates. I got an estimate from the architect, who got it from the engineers. We haven't gone through an energy model or anything like that. So the estimate from the architect, I got the actual bill from the Millis Library, which is about 2 years old library. That's about the same size we're proposing. 1-floor building, and also Blackstone, which is 11 years old, 1-story, about the same size, and actually designed by our architect, and costs are about $35,000 a year for everything: heat, air conditioning, lights, electricity. All 3 lined up right around there.
And again, that's in addition, because I'm assuming town hall covers the cost currently. for
Yeah,
utilities.
that's a roughly a 30%, 35% of just HVAC cost. The, custodial is another cost, so it's probably a, whatever, 40% increase in the budget.
Not quite, but maybe.
All right, thank you. Again, these were concerns that were sent to me, and I felt it was my responsibility to at least ask, so I appreciate your time.
No problem. I could speak one more thing to the scale of the building. And you came to actually one of our Building Needs Committee meetings, which I appreciate. The numbers of shelves, the numbers of computers, the numbers of seats are all driven by what's called the Wisconsin Library Standards, which is what the MBLC has dictated would be the standards used for developing a library. And those standards take into account our growth, our current population, as well as our projected growth. So we use the central mass projections. So that dictates the number of shelves, the number of volumes. We went for like an average service library, not the grandest scale or anything like that. If we built something smaller that didn't meet those standards, we wouldn't qualify for the grant. So we
It
would
might
get
be a little more
nothing.
affordable, though.
Probably not.
If I can afford, I don't know, a $10,000 car, but I could get better financing if I get a $20,000 car, does that make sense?
Well,
Even
it's
if
not-
someone potentially pays it because it's going to put more of a service burden upon the community.
I think the service burden would be the same whether we had a 10,000 square foot library or a 20,000 square foot library. I mean, there might be some HVAC cost differences, but we'd still probably need custodian for a 10,000 square foot facility. So I don't think the service contracts, the service costs for that building are gonna be that much different if we built something smaller. I do, and by virtue of the fact that the state's willing to cover half if we build it this way, and we have something that's gonna meet the needs of the town for the foreseeable future versus something that's gonna be undersized down the road, is penny wise and pound foolish, you know?
Can I say something about the Wisconsin library standards?
Sure.
So they say they're on a scale from like 1 to 4 being, okay to excellent. When we when we did our building program, we ran down, here's okay. We're over here. We're not even close. We're so undersized, understaffed, under collection amount compared to where we even should be for
Minimal.
basic services. The only thing we're maybe close to is on hours. We have about 49 hours downstairs, which is actually more than most libraries around us. We're open Monday through Saturday. A lot of libraries are closed either Monday or Friday or Saturday or any combination of those. We pull in people from the surrounding towns because their libraries aren't open on those days. So for that, we're grateful that we have the money that we can cover all those hours, but we're so undersized. This seems like such a huge leap, but it's where we should be.
We're starting, 300 yards before the finish line, the starting line, when we're measuring where we need to be.
Paul had one more question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
No, you go, Paul.
One question. I haven't heard anything about emergency power, generation, a building of that size, safety, lighting, water freezes at 32 degrees, there goes your heating system. Where's the generator?
We haven't spec'd out systems yet. We talked briefly about a generator.
We talked briefly about a generator. The grass road is part of the safety, being able to get around the facility in an emergency.
Grass road, I'm looking to keep this building goes out, power comes on.
Right.
Is there something there? Will there be something there?
Probably, we haven't gotten that far in our plan.
Pretty important spot,
Yeah.
especially if you're up there alone, and the lights go.
Yep.
Where are you?
In the dark.
In the dark.
Yeah, there would definitely be something for safety lighting.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I go back to the resource center, not a library, where it's more of a resource center, and I think maybe the possibility of some of the views of the townspeople that might have a little skepticism about it, see what we have now, and they're comparing that to something like this. But if they've gone into a real resource center and saw that it's not just books, not everybody in town has access to what I have, or other people, or my neighbor, or they might have access to more than I do. And I think it's a great resource. What she brought up, though, is really important. Is we're in the process right now of building another project in town that we're all aware of. And we always continuously keep talking about do it right the first time, build for the future. That's exactly what I think with this, too. You brought that up. We have to look to the future. We got to do it right the first time, not build small and then, or not small or big or whatever, but what's adequate for the town in the future also. We have to look to that, and it's great to see that you're looking at that as we do also with other projects in town. So thank you. I'm for it. At least the questions were answered about, one of my concerns was what Mr. Selectman Hall had brought up about what happens in, 15, 20 years, the building's gone. Or what Selectman Lemanik had brought up about, if we do start cutting and it's in a vacant building, to have somewhere in there that says if it's not an operational library, the town gets it back.
Yep.
So we're not sitting on something hoping that the future gets better. I mean, if 20 years or 10 years the doors are shut, they're locked, it's not looking good, and again, not being a negative person, but obviously, first instinct would probably be to hold on for hope. We're going to open the doors again. We're raising money, that there wouldn't be that, and we'd have a vacant building for another 20 years. But
I mean, the worst, so right now, I think we have, 49 hours a week open. If we did hit a downturn, we go back to not being open Monday. We have some flexibility in cutting hours open and things like that before we have to just.
Short of closing the library.
Yeah.
So, and still meet the requirements for the municipal appropriation for the minimum for the state and not having to do a waiver and things like that. So I think, we want to work with the town and be reasonable. And obviously if there's a time when all the departments are tightening the belt, the library is going to tighten its belt too.
And again, I don't mean that in a way of, for people in TV land, importance. Obviously we all know that fire, safety, schools. But if we're going to take on a project, it's better to do it right. Whether it's the school, the police department, the library, do it right, to fit what we need. Not overdo it, but not underdo it. And it's good to see that, you don't have a plan for the generator yet. It's something, Selectman Maynard had brought up. It's very, very important. It absolutely is. So to make the tweaks and turns along the way. But the idea that we're thinking today about the lease, and the question that was presented in front of us about leasing, I'm all for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. And I think Betsy, you as the director and the library trustees, you girls have done an awful lot of work. And you've put a lot of effort into this. And I think as this board, and I charge as the chairman of this board, that we should support the 3-acre parcel that you want to put up there. Ultimately, I think we should support a lot of the things, but it's going to be up to the voters, and we should let the voters decide. But we shouldn't put any negative stuff for you to go ahead and apply for your application and everything, and I wish you the best.
Thank you
very much.
Can I touch on two more things that I wrote down real
Sure.
quick? I know some of you guys were at Finance Committee, and they asked specifically about if we would increase our materials budget when we went into such a larger facility where we're going to have a lot more shelf space. The answer to that was no. We're very happy with the materials budget we have now. The problem is that we buy something and then we have to get rid of something else because there's just no room. If we went into a bigger facility, I can use the money I've got, buy, and not have to get rid of anything for a couple of years, and it would be wonderful.
Actually accrue.
Yeah, we can accrue. And the other thing is that we have formed a capital committee under the auspices of the Friends of the Library to raise money to hopefully offset whatever we'd be asking the town for. Their first goal is $500,000. They were actually meeting downstairs tonight to work on that. So we are actively trying to raise money too, so we would be going for hopefully asking the town for a little bit less.
What was the name of the committee? I'm sorry.
The capital committee.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a thermometer. We're just waiting until the snow goes down outside to plant it.
You could always get people that need community service to volunteer help if you needed students.
Yeah. That'd be good. So, we'll work on that too.
Everyone all set with everything?
All right.
Thank you,
so
ladies.
much.
Coming in. The next would be the town administrator's update. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few updates for the board. On April 4th, I'll present the final budget for FY18. That'll be a PowerPoint presentation, as it has been in the past. I will also present the draft warrant for the Maytown meeting. That's just, some of it's placeholders, because the language still needs to be worked out. And then the final warrant will come before the board on April 18th for signature, along with the election warrant as well. Town meeting will be held May 8th in the middle school, high school auditorium. Green Communities grant submission on Friday, March 3rd. We submitted a Green Communities grant request. We applied for the replacement of boilers at the Simonian Early Learning Center for $151,000. We also applied for 2 electric cars for $68,888 and 2 charging stations. We also applied for $7,500 from DEP, the EVIP program over at DEP. Doreen's already spoke with them. The application looks good. So in total, we applied for $227,388. Again, much of this work was done by Doreen DeFazio, the energy manager. She does a great job for us. Obviously, Jen Hager oversaw much of it, but most of the work was done by Doreen. Fire Department grants, Chief Belcito applied for and received 2 grants from the state. One is the Student Awareness of Fire Education, the SAFE grant, also known as SAFE, for $3,951, and the Senior SAFE grant for $2,596. The Senior Center is currently offering smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors free of cost to members of the Senior Center. So that is about it. The only other issue is under the reminders for public hearings of the Finance Committee. This Thursday, March 23rd, is the second committee meeting hearing, and the final meeting is on April 6th, which is also a Thursday. So it's not March 29th or 30th, as I mentioned in this, it's on April 6th is the final meeting, and that's been posted as such. That's all I have for updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you again for your update, as always. No significant changes to the budget at this point, or do I not want to give away the surprise?
No, it's actually getting better to some extent. We still have an issue. The big budget buster is healthcare, will continue to be. Property casualty insurance, I was able to cut that a little bit. I put $55,000 in there as a placeholder. I was able to get a 5% increase in property casualty, so that number went up to $400,000, so I was able to cut that number out. And again, all those funds went to reduce overall debt service to the town. Healthcare, we have an IAC meeting tomorrow, Insurance Advisory Committee meeting. We're out to bid to various carriers. I know we will get a bid from Fallon. And I really don't know much more than that.
July 1 year renewal date for that?
Yes, that's correct. Open enrollment is typically in the May timeframe, so we need to have a provider selected well before that and then set up the open enrollment. So, unfortunately, Maya seems a little unwilling to move at this point in time. I'm hoping once we get a Fallon bid in, we can go back to Maya and said, here's what they're proposing. I'm wondering if you come close to that. I don't know that that'll happen or not.
Okay. All right.
So yeah.
On the Green Communities Grant, it makes me smile when I read that, thinking about our old friend, Mr. Chizzy. This is his legacy in action, and continue to sing the praises of Doreen. It seems like everything she touches goes well. So,
what's really impressive about this is that because we have Doreen working for us, a few hours a week, but she works a lot more than she's paid for. This is the second grant within 2 years. So we received a grant last July. We spent that money this fall, and we've applied this March. So over a 6-month period of time, we spent that money, got the reports in, and then got clearance to apply for the next award.
Paid for her for the next 10 years.
And, we may do the same thing next year. We get the grant in July, we implement it over the next 6 months, we may apply the following March. So it's a great turnaround.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And, same thing for Chief Belcito, and I certainly, the Senior Safe Grant and the use of that's terrific, so that's a very good thing. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
Jim, again, I don't know how you keep doing that budget stuff, but you get it done. And all your staff, and all those hours you put in.
Yeah.
I see you here a lot of hours. Thank you. The Green Grant, it's going to save fuels, it's going to cut down on bigger vehicles. And the fire department, that person was needed, and it was a good pick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't, how can I beat that? I mean,
Let's go right
excellent job on the budget, excellent job, Doreen, excellent job, Chief Belcito.
Mike?
Great job with the budget. Again, I was thinking the same thing with Doreen, the fact that, when when we were talking about increasing our hours, you know, it's investing in something that's going to pay for itself. It's like an investment.
Right.
We're going to make money more than what she gets paid.
Right, right.
And she'll find ways to get us more money than what we're paying her, so. I
You know,
think
if,
she's-
if this is successful, that's a $250,000 grant she's
Yeah.
brought in on 9 hours a week.
Exactly.
So,
So that's why I thought when we increased the hours or kept her apart or have her, I thought it was perfect. Chief Belcito, the work that he's done to get those grants, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide, they just had a big special on that also on, I think it was Dateline, or it might have been 60 Minutes. They talked about every 10 years, and people don't know that it's not just the batteries, but it's the detectors themselves. To make people aware of that, you know, Selectman Maynard could probably fill in a little bit more on that for people. But it's 10 years, right? Replacement? of
Yes.
Detectors and monoxide, the whole unit, right? Thank you.
Like that, yeah.
Sounds good. I
Yes, it is
think
a-
you said yes.
It is a replacement requirement.
And that's it. I don't have any more. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All set?
I'm all set. Paul?
Yeah, I'm
All set.
I'm set now.
Yeah, Jim, thanks for everything. Great, good news in all of this. And I did receive word today from the Post 414 Legion that they've come up to their benchmark of $10,000 for the thermal imaging piece of apparatus for the fire department.
Was that the Sons that do that? The Sons of?
Both, you know,
Both.
so they will be giving us a presentation at some time, so that's great. Okay, announcements and Selectmen's Roundtable?
I'm all set, thank you.
Well,
Nothing good, thank you.
Jesse?
3 quick thank yous. Thank you to the Knights of Columbus for running the fish fry on Fridays at St. Mark's. It's been excellent, and I don't have to cook on Fridays, so I love it. So it's a win-win. Also, Meals on Wheels. When Michelle Edelstein was in here last week, or the week before, she had mentioned the fact that there's a grand cook-off tomorrow. So for those of you who are able to attend, we're going to be rooting for Diane Hanley. She's going to outcook the representative from the Sheriff's Department. And last but not least, thanks to all the volunteers down at Station 3. They had a Fill the Boot fundraiser at Market 32 this Saturday, and I got there a little late in the afternoon, but those boots were full. So thank you to Market 32 for hosting that. Thank you for the volunteers that showed up, and thank you for everyone in the community that threw some money in the boot.
And to feed off that, both the other units are down there too. I think they're having a competition on who can raise the most money between the different stations, and for charity there. The auction that's being held on April 4th.
Yes.
Is that they're doing all the advertising for that? Zecco's?
They are. They are. They all have their website as well as these flyers that you'll see around Town Hall and around the town in general. But that's moving along.
Is there a minimal bid, a minimum that we'll accept, or?
Kind of a different philosophy. Our auctioneer, Paul Zikos, doesn't believe in minimum bids. Lisa Trost and I are pushing him to set a minimum bid, but, I had that same philosophy when we auctioned off, what was that?
Morse Road.
Marsh Road.
Morse.
Down in Manchog. And, I felt like we should establish a minimum bid, and we should do it. And, he overruled us, and
People will generate it.
and ultimately, we got $50,000 for that property. So, he was able to produce the results. And
So
he advertises broadly, so it's not just Sutton, but he advertises across the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah, I could see, because you might scare off some people with a minimum, but then yet they're going to outbid each other and get in a war. So
Right.
Bring it up.
Yeah, that's how it happens.
All right, that's I wasn't sure.
You don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm all set. Thank you.
Next time you use municipal if it doesn't go well.
And correspondence, business topics.
All set. All set.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
So moved.
How about so moved?